first order of business will be the tax cut package the government took to the election. It wants this three-stage package passed in full. Labor says a vote on the third stage, which doesn't take effect until 2024, should be deferred. Joining me this morning is the Shadow Finance Minister, Katy Gallagher. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, David.
So the government says it won't split up the tax package, and it appears it may be close to a deal with the crossbench in the Senate on this to pass it in full. Has Labor made a decision yet on what it will do when it comes to a vote on the entire tax package?
No, we haven't. Our position is pretty clear around supporting stage one, stage two, bringing forward an element of stage two for stimulus. And then on stage three, our position is for that to be deferred and brought back if and when the government is able to get a deal with the crossbench, and that's not for certain at this point in time. We would have to take decisions based on what was happening at the time. But
so you won't do that until that point, as in you won't decide this early in the week in the caucus meeting. You'll wait until Thursday night, possibly, to make a decision on this?
Well, there's always elements of having to make decisions as the situation unfolds in Parliament, but obviously the caucus, the shadow cabinet, will have discussions at our meetings about how to handle.
You're sure your war game, right? This is coming. There's going to be a vote at some point on the entire package. What do we do?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, political parties will meet, and our different groups will meet.
But you haven't done this yet.
The caucus is the main decision-making body. That meets on Tuesday.
So will caucus decide on
Monday, I think, this week, because it's a funny week.
Right, OK. And will caucus decide?
Well, caucus is the ultimate decision-making body for
So will it decide whether you vote yes or no to the entire package? Or will that be I'm just trying to establish the mechanics here, or is that a shadow cabinet meeting that comes later?
Well, again, it's sort of, we have to be able to make decisions in the Parliament as situations unfold. Sometimes that doesn't mean you can bring the whole caucus back together, but the normal process is shadow cabinet, caucus makes decisions, and then often you have to make decisions based on those discussions. But we won't know. I mean, the government doesn't have the numbers yet. We've got a strong negotiating position, which we've put. We're still trying to convince the government that it's the way to go, and we'll certainly
this is coming.
And
there are some backbenchers in caucus who have pretty strong views about this. They don't want the first vote in the Parliament to be a vote against tax cuts.
Yeah, look, and there are. I mean, you've got a group of over 80 people that everyone's going to bring their own perspective and their own view. I mean, but in the Labor Party, once the caucus has made a decision, that's the decision we stick with. And
but will it make a decision is my question.
Those discussions need to happen this week, yeah.
But it doesn't sound like caucus will make that decision.
I've given you the answer,
okay.
David.
What's your view?
Caucus will meet.
Okay.
It will have a very good discussion about it, but our position is clear.
But it won't make a decision?
At the moment. Well, no, caucus does make decisions.
So we'll make the decision?
Well, I've told you we will have that discussion at caucus. That is the supreme decision-making body, but we also need to be able to deal with matters on the floor of the Parliament.
What's your own view on which way you should vote?
Well, my own view is that we should continue to negotiate on the position we have. It's the strongest position, it's the best one for the economy, and the government should agree with us on that and agree to defer stage three.
But if by some chance you don't have the numbers in the Parliament, in both chambers, to do that?
Well, we'll have to wait for that to happen. We're not convinced that that will happen, and we're going to continue to negotiate the way.
You're not convinced the government has the numbers in the House?
In the Senate, sorry. This is where it ultimately will come to.
Yeah, but it has to go through both houses. So government controls the House. This is coming, this vote on the full tax package, isn't it?
Yes, it will come.
And what's your own view on what you should do at that point?
Well, my own view is the position we've got at the moment, which is to seek for the government to defer stage three, and that will be the position we take into the House.
The Parliamentary Budget Office put out some modelling just the other day on the tax package. Those earning more than $180,000, it says, will receive $91 billion, or 28% of the tax cuts. That's both the combined cuts that have been passed, the Malcolm Turnbull tax cuts, and the promised tax cuts under Scott Morrison. Do you think that is too generous for those on the highest incomes?
Well, I think around stage three, I mean, we're worried on a couple of fronts. One is the affordability of it. Can the budget actually afford this in 4 or 5 years' time? We don't know what will be happening. The situation's already changed from the election in terms of the economic outlook. So we certainly have that concern. We do wonder whether that allocation, it's a huge part, particularly of the second unlegislated lot of tax cuts that going to the highest income earners, which would show that, you know, they're the group that are less likely to spend it in the economy. And I mean, this is part of our argument about why we have to deal with stage 3 now, when we've got pressures on the economy that, you know, require action now, so rather than 5 years' time.
It is too much, do you think, to go to the top?
Well, I mean, my own view, trying to project forward 5 years, is it's a lot of money where it's not clear about how it's going to be paid for. And when you look at it in those individual years, like in 24, 25, that stage 3 is about $19 billion a year. That is a lot more than we pay for a whole range of services, hospitals, aged care. You know, it is actually a very sizable part of the budget.
Sure, but
I don't think it's been explained about how that's to be paid for. It certainly has no stimulatory effect on the budget,
no
on the economy.
On the budget, yeah.
Well, certainly not to the... Well, not if we're looking for it now. It doesn't, because it's in 5 years' time.
No, but when it does happen...
and I don't think the government's trying... Well, I don't think the government's trying to explain it as a you know, stimulus on the economy then. They're talking about it as addressing bracket creep and things like that.
Well, just on that, I mean, even Anthony Albanese says workers on $200,000 are not the top end of town. Don't they deserve some return of bracket creep?
Well, I think, you know, if you asked any worker whether they wanted a tax cut and deserved a tax cut, I think it'd be hard to argue against it. But I think trying to project 5 years out and looking at, you know, how it's going to, you know, how you're going to pay for that, whether the budget can allocate that sort of funds, whether you want to tie potentially a new government to that sort of spending, then it does raise concerns. And I guess for us, it's why are we having this discussion now, 5 years beyond its actual impact, when we should be focusing on the economy now? And, you know, it's the government that's decided that for some reason or another it's not prepared to split it.
Do you think 200 grand is the top end of town or not?
No, I don't. I think, you know, a lot of my constituents would be earning incomes of that, and
so
you know, they'll often have...
affordable, they should get some return of bracket creep?
Well, I don't... You know, let's have that... let's have an argument around affordability of tax cuts, you know, in the near future, not the medium future, which is what we're being asked to do.
The budget, though, Finance Department figures this week show things are looking pretty good. The government's saying it's still not planning on a surplus this current financial year. It's planning on it for next financial year, but still it's, I think it's very, very close to a surplus or a balanced budget. Do you welcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we would want to see, particularly at times like now when there are concerns around the economy, how it's growing, you know, stagnant wages, lack of consumer confidence, all those things. I mean, it is useful and desirable for there to be a surplus, and we would certainly encourage the government to continue to work on that.
A couple of other things. The Prime Minister this week called for a fresh review of industrial relations laws, but he did say at the outset that, quote, any changes in this area must protect the rights and entitlements of workers. Do you agree, then, it is worth looking at what have been some pretty significant changes in our workplace over the last decade or so?
Well, I think, you know, it's hard to believe a Liberal Prime Minister, Liberal government on industrial relations reform when you look at their track record. We've got work choices, we've got a Royal Commission into trade unions, we've had a pretty blistering attack for the last, you know, 6 years whilst in government on unions and a fair bit of union bashing going on. So, I don't know, it's a bit hard for someone from my side of politics to sit there and listen to that and believe that there's concern about workers' rights and conditions.
Would there be changes you'd like to see happen, given the growth of the gig economy, for example, given some of the problems around enterprise bargaining at the moment?
Well, I think today one of the things they could do is reverse the penalty rates cuts, because today's another cut comes in on those people working Sundays, public holidays. They're down to, you know, just over time and a half now. They're the sort of changes, I think. When we're looking at stagnant wages, we should be looking at how we can actually invest in working people and make sure they're getting a fair share of the pie. And again, look, maybe it's a fair bit of cynicism from my part, but, you know, history, form and practice would indicate that, you know, it's a pretty one-sided debate from the coalition.
A final one, Christopher Pyne, we learnt this week, taking a consulting job with EY to help clients in the defence industry. Do you think that is a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct?
Well, it looks a bit sus to me, I think. It's pretty close into the area he was working. I know they're being, trying to be quite flexible with their language about what he's to work on, but I think it plays into that, lack of confidence people have in politicians, that it's all about them and not about the Australian community. To walk out of a job and to just walk straight into one that has links with the job you were minister for, it does make that statement in the ministerial standards look a bit weak, I think.
I mean, it's happened on the Labor side. We know as well in the past. Should this one be referred to Parliament's Privileges Committee?
Well, I saw Erica Betts suggesting that, which would say the old wars don't go away when you leave the Parliament, do they? Look, I think that's a matter for the House. I'm not sure about how they do things like that. But, I think around integrity in politics, having some separation when you leave is important so that people trust you and trust that the government's working in their interests. And it looks a bit dodgy to me.
All right, Shadow Finance Minister Katy Gallagher, good luck with the week ahead of ceremony and some legislation as well in Parliament. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, David.